Why don't you go practice some sign language with Haley? I hope she didn't hear me. Oh, wait. Never mind.
Peter has been Spider-Man for a long time now, and being Spider-Man comes with its more than fair share of triumphs, responsibilities, and stress. From the very beginning of the game, we are shown just how much more stress and responsibility are placed onto him through getting fired from the job that he was trying not to lose, a new powerful villain to deal with, all while his approach in handling all of it seems to be changing due to the influence of his new symbiote suit, which his friend whom he hasn't seen in years is waiting to get back from him because it's keeping him alive. But it makes Peter feel more powerful, and he doesn't want to give it back. There's simply too much to do and not enough to respond back with, and it took its toll on Peter. Peter is so relatable in this game. The world keeps beating on him and he always keeps pushing through because people need him. But the symbiote makes him feel like he can actually catch a break and feel adequate in handling his tasks, but it only consumes him, like a bad addiction. The Venom suit acts as a catalyst, surfacing and amplifying Peter's inner thoughts and fears while infusing them with anger, as the symbiote thrives on that emotion. This raises a question. If Venom is so objectively evil and terrifying, why do people like Venom so much? Well, straight away we can see that part of Venom's allure comes from its contrast with the beloved Peter Parker, portraying him in a completely different light. The context of this transformation adds to Venom's intrigue. Venom killing random people is not just cool on its own, but it taps into a dynamic described as attractive by some, the asshole Giga Chad versus the nice guy scenario that I'm sure you've probably heard of before. As viewers or players, we may subconsciously adopt this perspective and perceive one character as cooler than another based on their actions and how they're treated by their peers. Feared, respected, or disregarded, forgotten. Peter doesn't always put what he wants as the main priority, like when it came to saving Aunt May or saving everyone. He had to choose everyone because ultimately less damage would have been done, whereas with a character like Venom, or any villain really, they would choose the one person, or their own desire over the general importance of the situation. Venom is willing to take on challenges others might shy away from and to act on his own terms. While he isn't hedonistic, his approach is usually one of instant gratification, pursuing a greater future for only himself rather than for everyone. Venom's persona exudes confidence, assertiveness, and dominance, which resonates with those who find Peter's normal self less assertive or confident, even though Peter has displayed these traits in isolated instances. Venom's appeal may also stem from his dangerous nature. Unlike Peter, who respects his limitations and is cautious even with his foes, Venom doesn't adhere to any moral code and is willing to kill if people stand in his way, or even for the sheer thrill. Spider-Man doesn't kill. Negative influences like the symbiote can appear helpful, just to keep you under their control. Just like when the symbiote pulls the blanket over Peter. It's kind of a funny, cute moment, but remember that the symbiote only cares about self-preservation and fear of death. So it's not so much he thought that Peter was cold, but that it needs Peter alive and in tip-top shape. Venom's thoughts are self-indulgent and focused on immediate satisfaction, while Peter as Spider-Man understands the importance of doing the hard things even when he doesn't feel like it. The symbiote has always been a metaphor for any addiction and what it turns us into. I think the reason it always works is the symbiote doesn't actually do anything except mentally reinforce what the host already thinks.
I can't let this go. I'm finally everything everyone needs me to be.
It doesn't create new insecurities and fears, but amplifies those that already exist within the host. Overcoming these internal struggles is at the core of the host's journey of self-improvement. Everyone wants to be Spider-Man, but no one wants to be Peter Parker. Never give up, never back down. We should strive to emulate both Peter and Miles because they have a spectacular ability to resist temptations, even when those temptations are presented on a silver platter. Their unwavering commitment to do what is right, even when it requires sacrifices or opting for the more challenging path over the easier one, sets a powerful example. Some may argue that Miles is superior to Peter, specifically because Peter was straight up tweaking for most of the game. They point to Miles' ability to maintain composure and keep things under control, seemingly the opposite of what Peter was doing. However, it's important to consider that if Miles had been in Peter's shoes, and he was the one infiltrated by the symbiote, then the story probably would have been pretty similar, just the positions of the two would have been switched. In the end, Peter did what was needed, just as Miles did, showcasing their shared heroic qualities, because more important than the mask itself is who the person underneath is, and how they will handle their responsibilities. Peter found his way, found who he was as a person, as Spider-Man, and then lost his way just when he thought nothing else could surprise him again through the symbiote's influence, which I think a lot of people can relate to. The part about losing your way, not about having the symbiote. That's why I think the ending of the game is so cool, because Peter then adopts the anti-Venom, the very antithesis to the affliction called Venom. And to me, this represents his emergence as Spider-Man and as a person. He went through it and then came back out of it refined. And his costume is still malleable and full of tendrils, just like the OG Venom symbiote suit, which to me represents his newfound malleability and adaptability that came with the Venom suit, but with a clearer conscience and refined values that reflect his moral code and responsibility and good nature. So not only does he get to keep the enhanced abilities, but he gets to keep his sanity as well. Have your cake and eat it too. This video is more about the effect of the symbiote on the mind and more so Peter's story, but we can definitely take a few notes from Miles as well. Miles is not necessarily better or worse than Peter in terms of philosophy, but he certainly did do something right. Even when Peter was being a downer and saying all these awful things and letting his intrusive thoughts get the better of him, Miles reassured Peter that these thoughts were not the truth and stood as a pillar of support, consistently reminding Peter that these thoughts didn't define reality. And equally as important, Miles refused to let Peter's negativity sway his own resolve.
One of one. Looks good.
Miles kept on being Miles, and kept being the best Spider-Man he could be, whether or not his mentor was on the same path. He knew what was right, and he wasn't going to let his mentor convince him differently under such dire circumstances. Especially since Peter was much more hostile. What good would come from listening to someone's reasoning when they themselves are not reasonable? It's cooler to be dark and badass and not give a shit than it is to be someone people can rely on and be consistent like normal Peter Parker Spider-Man, and Miles as well. It's way easier to just not talk to anyone and be quiet and mysterious all the time, adopting a detached demeanor. On the contrary, the harder path of openness, acceptance, and patience in being a reliable and kind individual ultimately bears more fruit than a path marked by hatred and indulgence in intrusive and negative thoughts. Miles isn't trying to steal the spotlight or become the superior hero to his mentor. At the end of it all, it wasn't about Miles winning a competition. It was about helping Peter with his struggle to rid himself of the symbiote. At one point during their fight, Miles even stopped ringing the bell which hurt the symbiote, knowing that Peter is stronger and more capable of dealing with it on his own than he thinks. The pivotal moment arrived when Peter managed to separate himself from the symbiote all on his own, a clear demonstration that he doesn't need it to feel strong. And even though he did it on his own, he knew that he was not alone, because Miles was there with full faith in Peter's ability. Spider-Man is more than just the mask, but also the person who wears the mask. The real essence lies in the person beneath the mask, with their emotions and feelings. Miles articulates this brilliantly by noting that wearing the Spider-Man suit and possessing powers won't magically solve every problem. He wants Peter to understand that heroes, like everyone else, grapple with emotions, but there are people who care about him that can listen and offer support. He almost lost himself, and he was clearly terrified of it happening in front of Miles, the one guy that had his back 100%. And he was afraid not only because of the destruction that might come from it, but also that it would mentally scar Miles and possibly change his perspective of the world, when in fact, his optimistic and never back down attitude is exactly what made Peter able to free himself from the symbiote. He had a brother cheering him on through and through and not letting Peter slip away completely. For a long time now, Venom has been likened to the effects and symptoms of drugs. It may be a little more extreme than the effects of drugs, but the factor of addiction is all the same. What's more than that, the standing of the symbiote or even drugs is not so cut and dry, because if it were, then it would either be illegal everywhere or illegal nowhere. Some people think that the Venom version of Peter Parker is cooler than the normal version we're all familiar with, mostly due to the effects of the suit giving Peter a more assertive, dark, and animalistic demeanor. But coolness in Peter's scenario comes at a price. The trade-off being loving relationships and a peaceful state of mind. Luckily for Peter, he hadn't cut ties with all of his loved ones, and they are the ones who ended up bringing him back from his affliction. A lifestyle led with kindness and patience bears more fruit than one led with hatred and jealousy. And it's funny that the fruits Peter bore through his loving demeanor before the symbiote are the same fruits which made it possible for there to be an after the symbiote. Just remember, when you help someone, you help everyone. Take care, bro.